We can't effectively have a housing market that's sustainable for people who have to actually work here unless we have a reasonable mass transit system and we actually build some level of density.
Miami-Dade County Chairman Oliver Gilbert, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, man. It's always good to be with you, my friend.
And it's so good to see you. So, all right, we're going to dive into transportation.
Okay.
Right? And this is, of course, something that you're really well suited to talk about. Not only are you chairman of the Miami-Dade County Commission, but you previously were chairman of the Transportation Planning Organization, chair of the Southeast Florida Transportation Council. So this has been your thing.
It has.
And of course, as we think about our community, if anyone wants to come up with this sort of their top 5 list of issues to solve now or issues that we need to solve for our future, transportation is probably on most people's list. This is an issue.
It's definitely going to be on most people's list. The challenge is when people ask for those lists, that we're always trying to list things. And so you're right, I served as the TPO chairperson, and I served 2 consecutive terms. I served as the municipal representative, I served as chair, and then I served when I was the vice chair of the county commission. So I did something that probably no one else will ever do. I served consecutively, but it gave me an opportunity to learn transportation planning, and actually have a conversation with my colleagues on the TPO and now the county commission about how intricate transportation is to everything. We have all of these disparate conversations. We talk about different things. What are your priorities? My priority is housing and the affordability of housing and affordable housing. Mine is resiliency, and mine is economic development, and mine is transportation. In truth, you have to be able to have mass transit for all of those things. We can't effectively have a housing market that's sustainable for people who have to actually work here, regular folks who work here, unless we have a reasonable mass transit system, and along those mass transit corridors, we actually build some level of density.
As you know, with Opportunity Miami, our whole mission here is to pull ourselves out of the here and now and think about our future. Think about the Miami of 2030, the Miami of 2040. When it comes to mobility, what's your vision of what that future looks like? How will people get around?
It's everything. It's everything, and some of it is stationary. And when I say that, people think it's strange, but it's everything, and there has to be mass transit. We have to have rapid mass transit. We have to build rail of some sort. We have to be able to transgress the disparate and separate ends of the county quickly. We have to be able to do that. So as we try to retrofit the county with mass transit, we're planning to do it with the SMART plan, because we're not doing it as though we're a brand new county. We can't just pick these routes. We have what we have as far as, geographic resources. So we're doing it in different ways in different places. We're trying to do bus rapid here and rail up there and a bridge across the beach link. We're trying to do different things, but it has to be mass transit. And we have to have everything else to feed into that. So when people ask whether it's going to be mass transit or it's going to be more bicycle lanes or it's going to be Ubers or it's going to be eVTOLs, what I say is going to be all of the above. It's going to be all of the above. The system is not built for one answer. The system is built for a conglomerate of answers, and the aggregated effect of those answers provide relief in different ways. And so as we try to architect this community for the next 30 and 40 years, we shouldn't think about one thing, we should think about everything. It's very difficult. I'm very, very reticent to actually say, oh yeah, we're not going to do that. Well, let's look at it. My answer is always, let's just look at it. Someone approached me about seaplanes and things that can be done with seaplanes, gliders that just glide over. Well, absolutely, that's something we can do.
So your posture is we need an open mind, and how we get around will be lots of different ways going forward.
Yeah.
And we'll be successful if we embrace lots of different things.
Well, embrace lots of different things, but also embrace the idea of standing still. I say that because COVID taught us something. COVID taught us that not everybody has to go to work every time, all the time. So the reason why congestion is because we're all going in the same direction at the same time. We're either all coming to our employment hubs around the same time, or we're all going home back to the suburbs, spreading out all at the same time. Well, now we know that working remotely is possible for a whole bunch of people.
Sure.
We can learn things from that, and that are transferable to a greater plan on how we actually architect transportation in the future that might not involve moving. It might just involve better Wi-Fi. It might involve the fiber optics going throughout our community. It might involve that type of infrastructure. We need to connect people in those ways also. And so I look at all of those things, and I think about all of those things in terms of transportation, because I believe that all of them can affect transportation in that way.
So, what I'm going to do, we'll play a little game.
Okay.
And I'm going to run through some different things. We'll play a game. We'll do long or short. Long as, you're a buyer and you think that this is going to happen, or, well, you'd be a shorter of that stock because you're not so sure.
Okay.
Up for the game?
I'm in.
All right, let's do it. All right. Electric vehicles, the transition to EVs. By 2030, this be a big part of our lives?
Long.
Long?
I think it will be a big part of our lives. Yes.
And as part of that, long or short on the county building out a large EV charging network?
Neither.
We can have a middle ground.
So this is the
Tell
issue.
us why.
I think that there's going to be something built out. I don't know whether the county does it.
Okay.
I think that there has to be something built out. I just don't know
So
whether
the
the county
neither
does.
is, right, the private sector builds it out.
Yeah, the private sector builds it
Tesla,
out.
Blink, et cetera.
Blink, or it could be the federal government, because
Yeah.
I think it could be the state chiming in. I don't know if the county builds it out, but we know that it's going to exist. The challenge is this, though. Sometimes people think about electric vehicles, and electric vehicles solve a problem that is resiliency, but they don't solve a problem that's congestion on the roads. Right. They don't help solve the problem of housing prices, because it's still a car.
Right.
And you're still on the road.
Right, and you're still stuck in
traffic.
traffic.
Yes, so exactly.
Right.
So now you're stuck in traffic in a car that's a lot more quiet.
Okay, let's talk rail.
Okay.
North Quarter.
Long, for sure.
Long. Do you think we'll see this by 2030?
By 2030, that's in 7 years. Will we see it? No. I think we'll start by then. I think that it's going to be long to build out heavy rail along the North Corridor, connecting us to Broward County and hopefully going into Broward County. It has to happen. We know that most of these things that with regard to mass transit will happen because we're running out of options.
Right.
So in other parts of the state, they have the ability to build more roads and different roads to get places. We don't really have that as a luxury right now.
Miami Beach, long or short?
Long.
Long?
Long.
Same time frame?
I think it could be a little sooner. It just depends on how the conversations that bear out. It's ironic that the beach does not necessarily want it.
Want it, right.
So and yeah, they don't actually want it. So that's interesting. But I think that's where you come in as a county commission in the state, and you have to look at ultimately not just what they want, but what's in the best interest of everybody. So you have all of these folks who live on the mainland who work on the beach. And so us trying to get them there to support the beach economy and help support the greater Miami-Dade economy is challenging, and it's becoming more challenging. We have to make sure that we have ways to actually move them back and forth. And so I'm long on it. I think it has to happen.
CSX lines, and just to describe, is that we of course have these right-of-ways that run all through Miami-Dade County that are owned by the train operator CSX, and the thought is of turning those into passenger, long or short.
I'm long on that. But it's interesting because this is something that's been talked about for a long time now.
Yeah.
And previously it was thought to be out of our grasp with regard to cost. And they're saying now they're more reasonable. If they're more reasonable, I think it can be something that's done. People think that just because the rails are there, we can do it quickly. We still can't do it quickly. I mean, we can do it quicker.
So we're still talking about mid-2030.
Yeah, we can do it quicker. So
right.
We can do it quicker. We can get trains on there, but to build out the stations and the things like that, those things actually they're going to take some time. But I'm long on that. I think that if we have that resource, we have that asset, it's built in already, and we can try to utilize that asset to bring people from point A to point B to point C, I think that it would be silly of us not to be long on it.
And the SMART plan in total?
I'm long on the SMART plan.
Wow.
I'm long on the SMART plan because of necessity. So the question that we have about SMART, there's very little disagreement that we need to do something about mass transit. The question just always becomes how we pay for it.
Right.
So the conversation that we have about transportation is really a conversation we should be having about what we value, because we focus on transportation. We focus on what it costs to do it. We don't pay attention to, or it's hard to capture what it costs if you don't do it. And so the amount of time that we're losing as individuals, as family members,
sure.
It's tough. The amount of time that we're using with regard to transporting goods and providing services is tough. We don't get to actually capture that. We just suffer in silence those things. And so the problem is that we should have never normalized that. This situation that we have normalized is not normal and is a construct that we can redefine. The fact that housing prices, we expect to be high now. We've normalized it. When you normalize things, what happens is that there's never an active dissent or ability to change, because people see it as normal. It doesn't have to be. And so the conversation we have to have going forward as a community is what we're willing to pay for.
And by 2040, you think we could see all of this?
I think we can see a bunch of it
Okay.
by 2040.
Rail versus bus rapid transit. What do you think our future?
Depends on the area. I believe that people have a stereotype in their head about what buses are. They're predisposed to be against buses. The BRT that we're going to try to introduce down south won't feel like a bus because you'll have a dedicated lane, you'll be moving, you'll get in stations that just relatively look like a train station. You'll just know that you're moving. They'll have very similar headways. You'll get there basically as quick. So I think, but there's an opportunity to do that because they have the busway down south. Well, in the north part of the county, it's very challenging for us to build.
To elevate.
We have to elevate. So having an elevated BRT doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Sense.
So that's why you go with rail there. So it just depends on the area.
Long or short, EV tolls, and of course that's electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles.
I think I'm long on them. I think that they have a place.
Now, what do you think? Okay, so let's pause on that one for a second. You talk to residents in District 1 in Miami Gardens and say, how will an EV toll be a part of my life as we think about the next 2, 3, 4 years?
It won't be a part of everybody's life. I do think that it can be brought to market in a way that actually democratizes it, makes it available to everybody, but I don't think it will be a part of everybody's life. But I think it'll be something that's a vibrant industry. So as a general rule, once the technology exists to do something, what we know about tomorrow is that we're going to do it. So yeah, we're going to do it. Yeah. So it's one of those things where people will say, oh man, a flying car, a flying Uber, and they're like, yeah, like but Jetsons. People, it's like the Jetsons, but that makes self-driving cars kid, like Knight Rider. Right. I mean, yeah. So these things have a way of manifesting themselves once the technology is proven to be viable and safe.
And this goes to your point at the outset, is that you think as we're thinking about mobility and transportation, having an open mind is really important.
You have to have an open mind. Okay. Tomorrow's going to be shaped by people who actually don't believe it has to look like yesterday.
You're chairing a committee that's going to come up with a new plan around EV tolls.
I sponsored the legislation that created a work group that's going to help develop the framework. And so one of the things I've noticed is that we sometimes let government get behind technology. So what I said was, hey, we know this technology is developing, and this technology is exciting for transportation, but it's exciting for also trying to be one of the places that does it first, because we can actually try to build out the industry. 100%. So there's jobs that are attached to these things. And so I said, let's put together this framework now. Let's get people from the private industry. Let's get people, FP&L, everybody. Let's all start talking about it. Let's start talking about it and figure out how the framework looks. So when the technology is ready to go, we're ready to go with it.
What are your, say, top 3 priorities during your tenure as chairman, as your tenure as county commissioner, in terms of driving, building Miami-Dade's mobility future?
I only have one. It's really just the SMART plan. It's making meaningful progress on the SMART plan. I think I shared this earlier. I don't view success as necessarily finishing something. I see it as doing my part to complete something. And so I think that we have to make progress on all of our plans.
So one of the really interesting things about Miami-Dade County is that on the one hand, mobility is such a challenge. On the other hand, we've been a place of one of the most interesting innovations in mobility in the country, and that is with Brightline, with intercity rail, the first privately funded passenger railway in decades, I think perhaps even a century, and it's happening here in Miami. So that happened pretty quickly, and yet so many of the things that we're talking about right now are so hard to get started, as you said. Why?
The rail was there.
Right.
The rail was there. The rail was there, and we have other requirements. So, but the rail being there is big. So when we say the rail was there, what that means is
the rail was there for Brightline.
Yeah, for Brightline. They didn't have to do environmentals.
Right.
So the environmental process of building, for instance, elevated rail itself is 3 years. So we're going to try to get through it in 2, but it's 3 years. It's a solid 3 years just getting through the environmental process, the bidding process for what will be a project that's well over $1 billion will not be an insignificant thing. And whoever's on the county commission, it'll take all of their fortitude to just get through that. I mean, so it's not for the faint at heart, and it's not going to be done quickly. But I know that the reality of situations are that these generational projects very rarely get finished in 2 terms.
Right.
So you have to actually, you have to get the financing right, you get the environmentalists right, you get the planning right, and then you break ground. When you break ground, remember, life doesn't stop while you're building this. So you can't build it at the pace that you would have to. So Brightline had to come up with stations, which we helped with.
Yeah, right. And
a train,
yeah.
which a very nice train, which is cool, but it's not the scope of what we will have to do as we build up the SMART program.
By the way, Tri-Rail coming into downtown, into the Brightline station.
I'm long on that. I'm long on rail generally.
Long on that? We can see that this year?
I could see that.
Long this year.
So what happens is, that's just a matter of people figuring it out and agreeing. So it's possible to do that. It's a lot less possible, more problematic when you have to actually build something, construct something, conceive something, design something, environmental something, learn to find, it's more difficult. Because conversations about Tri-Rail, between Tri-Rail and Brightline, and even, the CSX lines, those are really conversations about money. And so the real question is not what you want, but what do you want to pay for? What are you willing to pay for?
And that's important too, as we're talking about transportation and mobility, the affordability, the equity question.
Yes.
That this is good transportation mobility opens up opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those are things that we hadn't previously connected together. And so I think that having those type of conversations, just a real honest conversation about what it looks like and what we have to do and what's required of us and why it is our responsibility. The future of housing in Miami-Dade County has to include greater density. And if not, it's not going to be someplace that we can afford to live. So I was a kid who caught the 27 to the Metro Rail and took that Metro Rail to my University of Miami for law school. Literally, that Metro Rail helped get me my law degree. That Metro Rail made me a partner in a law firm. That Metro Rail made me a prosecutor. That Metro Rail made me mayor. That's part of my story. How do we actually build that type of a possibility for kids to come? I take seriously that responsibility. I think every leader should, but beyond every elected leader, every one of us should. Because that's been the truth of people from Miami, people from America, the entirety of our existence, that we believe that we are creating something that will exist past us and that it has to work for the future too. Well, for us to make Miami-Dade County work for the generations of Miami-Dade County residents to come, we're going to have to make some changes and have some honest conversations.